What if I told you that some death row inmates have survived their executions? It sounds unbelievable, but it has happened more than once. What happens when someone is sentenced to death but lives through the execution? Well, today, we have 7 real stories of inmates who face this unimaginable situation. Willie Francis. Willie Francis was a teenager when he faced the electric chair in Louisiana. At just 17 years old, he was sentenced to death for the murder of a pharmacist named Andrew Thomas. This case took place in 1946, when the state used electrocution as the method of execution. Willie was supposed to die by the electric chair on May 3rd of that year, but things did not go as planned. When the electric chair was activated, something went wrong. The machine malfunctioned, and Willie survived the electrocution attempt. Witnesses reported that Francis shouted during the process that something was wrong, but the malfunction was not enough to complete the execution. After the failed execution attempt, many legal questions arose. People started to debate whether a second attempt at execution was legal. Some argued that surviving one execution should be enough, and that it would be unfair to put him through it again. On the other hand, the state claimed that the failure of the equipment did not change the fact that he was sentenced to die. The case eventually reached the Supreme Court. In a close decision, the court ruled that a second attempt could be made to execute Francis. This decision stirred a lot of controversy at the time. A year later, in 1947, Willie Francis was placed in the electric chair once again. This time, the equipment functioned as expected, and he was executed. Willie's case continues to be a point of discussion when it comes to the death penalty. The failed execution showed that the system could make mistakes, and it made people wonder whether it was right to attempt to execute someone more than once. Next case is one of the rare instances where a person survived an execution attempt. Rommel Broom. Broom was sentenced to death in Ohio for the kidnapping, rape, and murder of a 14-year-old girl named Trina Middleton in 1984. After years of legal battles and appeals, the state scheduled his execution by lethal injection in 2009. On September 15, 2009, the execution team tried to carry out his sentence, but they encountered an unexpected problem. For over 2 hours, the execution team struggled to find a suitable vein in Broom's body to administer the lethal injection. They tried multiple times, but were unsuccessful in completing the procedure. During this time, Broom was stuck with needles repeatedly, but no vein could be found to deliver the drugs. He even helped the team by trying to move his body to make the process easier, but it did not work. After 2 hours of trying, the governor of Ohio called off the execution. This incident left many people questioning the effectiveness and humanity of lethal injection. It also raised concerns about whether Broom could legally be subjected to another execution attempt, considering what he had already endured. Rommel Broom's lawyers argued that subjecting him to a second execution would be a violation of his rights. They believed that the failed attempt caused him undue pain and suffering. But the state argued that Broom had not actually been executed and should still face the death penalty. Broom remained on death row for several more years while legal debates continued. In 2020, Rommel Broom died of natural causes, and the question of whether the state would attempt to execute him again was left unresolved. John Lee. John Lee's case is one of the most famous stories of a person surviving an execution. Lee was sentenced to death in the United Kingdom for the execution of his employer, Emma Kais, in 1884. The method of execution was hanging, which was commonly used at the time. Lee, however, became known as the man they could not hang due to a series of strange events that happened during his execution. On February 23, 1885, John Lee was brought to the gallows for his hanging. But when the time came to drop the trap door that would cause his death, something went wrong. The trap door refused to open. The executioner tried several times to make it work, but each time, the mechanism failed. They checked everything to see if there was a technical problem, but they found no explanation for why it was not working. After 3 attempts, the officials decided to stop the execution. This strange series of events led to widespread public interest in Lee's case. Some people believed it was a sign that John Lee was innocent, while others thought it was a technical malfunction. Because of the failure of the gallows, John Lee's sentence was eventually commuted to life imprisonment. He spent many years in prison before being released. Wenceslao Moguel. Moguel was a soldier in the Mexican Revolution when he was captured by enemy forces in 1915. As a punishment for his actions during the war, he was sentenced to be executed by a firing squad. The firing squad lined up and shot Moguel multiple times. They even followed the usual procedure of firing a final shot, known as the coup de grace, aimed at his head to ensure that he would not survive. But Moguel did survive. Incredibly, despite being shot multiple times, including in the head, Moguel managed to escape. After the firing squad left him for dead, Moguel was still alive. He was able to get up and make his way to safety, where he received medical help for his injuries. His survival stunned everyone who heard his story. To survive a firing squad, especially after being shot in the head, was almost unheard of. Moguel's case became a symbol of incredible resilience and luck. Wenceslao Moguel lived for many years after the failed execution. Joseph Wood. Joseph Wood's execution in Arizona in 2014 became infamous for the length of time it took and the issues that occurred during the process. Wood was sentenced to death for the murder of his ex-girlfriend and her father in 1989. After years of legal battles, his execution was finally scheduled for July 23, 2014. The method of execution was lethal injection, but things did not go as planned. Wood's execution took much longer than expected. Typically, a lethal injection should result in death within minutes, but in Wood's case, it took almost 2 hours for him to die. Witnesses reported that Wood gasped for air and struggled during the process, which raised concerns about the effectiveness of the drugs being used. The execution team had administered a combination of drugs that were supposed to cause a quick and painless death, but the drugs did not work as intended. This led to a drawn-out and painful process that left many people questioning the use of lethal injection. Although Wood was eventually pronounced dead, the problems with his execution led to widespread criticism. The state of Arizona faced lawsuits and calls for investigations into its execution procedures. Some people argued that what happened to Joseph Wood was cruel and inhumane, and the case added to the ongoing debate about whether lethal injection should continue to be used. Jesse Taffero. Jesse Taffero's execution in 1990 became infamous for the horrific events that occurred during the process. Taffero was convicted of murdering 2 police officers in Florida in 1976, along with his partner. After years of legal battles and failed appeals, he was sentenced to die in the electric chair. On May 4, 1990, Jesse Taffero was brought to the electric chair in Florida for his execution. The procedure, however, did not go as planned, and it quickly turned into a gruesome spectacle. When the electric current was activated, flames shot out from Taffero's head, horrifying everyone who was present. The flames were caused by the use of a synthetic sponge, which was not supposed to be used in the electric chair. As a result, the execution was botched, and Taffero suffered for several minutes before he eventually died. The horrific nature of Taffero's execution drew widespread attention and criticism. Many people argued that the use of the electric chair was inhumane, especially after witnessing what happened to Taffero. The fact that he experienced visible pain and suffering during the execution raised serious ethical questions about the death penalty and the methods used to carry it out. The case also led to calls for changes in how executions were conducted in Florida and other states that still use the electric chair. After Taffero's death, his case continued to be the subject of debate, not just because of the botched execution, but also because of questions surrounding his guilt. Some people believed that Taffero may not have been the one who pulled the trigger in the murders, and there was controversy over the reliability of the evidence used to convict him. Taffero's partner, who was also involved in the crime, had her sentence reduced, which led to further questions about the fairness of Taffero's execution. So, what do you think about this? Comment down your opinion right now, and while you're down there, make sure to give this video a like and hit that subscribe button as well.